Part 3, Mitt and Minn's Illinois Adventure. If you remember from the last chapter, Quimby tells Mitt and Minn that their parents are gone. Chapter 7, Fat, Lazy Pigs. Mitt and Minn began to sob, thinking the worst. Perhaps the barn was too messy and there wasn't enough food for them to survive. Perhaps there were too many sows and boars and they would get stepped on. Perhaps. "You just missed them. They left this morning," continued Quimby. Quimby invited the mice into the barn to explain how their parents had left because the barn repairman was here last night and said the barn could not be saved and would have to be torn down. She told Mitt and Minn that a truck left early that morning for Chicago, and their parents thought perhaps they could make a new start in the big city. Mitt and Minn looked around the barn, which was the filthiest barn they had ever seen. In the midst of it, they noticed one old photograph hanging on the wall. It was a beautiful, healthy boar, and beneath the picture it said, "Swindler's Sweet Delight, Grand Champion, 1905. And fourth graders, a boar is a male pig. That's what a boar is. Quimby explained, "Long ago, this farm belonged to the Swindler family. It was a tidy farm with red hogs, white hogs, and spotted hogs. A cleaner farm there never was. Sweet Delight was the grandest champion that ever lived. He wore every blue ribbon at the state fair and every gold championship cup. He was strong and meaty. He was kind in nature and never boastful about his good fortune. Then came the piglets of Sweet Delight. They were not so bad, but then came his children's children. With every generation, each litter thought that they were more entitled to grand rewards than ever before. These young pigs ate much. They slept much. They grew soft and muddy and greedy. And so did the children of the Swindler family. Now that all are left are the two Swindler brothers, and they can barely afford to keep the farm running. Soon it will be all over, as the barn must be torn down and the pigs sent away. That's why your parents had to leave." And here's an illustration of Quimby telling the story to Mitt and Minn. So that's Quimby telling the story. Mitt and Minn looked out over the barnyard. A lazier group of pigs they had never seen. Although Mitt and Minn were sad their parents were not here at the Swindler farm, they were relieved they were not living in such a horrible place. But now as the daylight was burning, Mitt and Minn had to figure out how to get to Chicago. Victor, who had grown to like Mitt and Minn very much, told them that tomorrow there would be 2 trucks arriving in the early morning. He told the mice that one delivers feed, the other delivers seed. Both trucks are marked. One says feed, F-E-E-D. The other says seed, S-E-E-D. The feed truck is from Chicago, which is directly east. The seed truck is from the south. All Mitt and Minn had to do now was to hide in the feed truck when it arrived and take it to Chicago tomorrow morning. It would not be hard to do. At least, that's what they thought. And here's an illustration of that Sweet Delight that Quimby was talking about at the beginning of the chapter when she said that the farm used to be such a nice farm. Okay, chapter 8. Feed and seed. So feed and seed. And there's the mice sleeping. Mitt and Minn woke when they heard the trucks arrive. They came earlier than Victor thought. It was so early in the morning that it seemed to be more like the middle of the night. The moon was covered by the clouds, making it very dark outside. The trucks were similar, so Mitt and Minn paid close attention to the letters on the sides of each. This was going to be easy. The drivers were in the house, settling up with the Swindler brothers, and the back door to the feed truck was wide open. Victor and Quimby stood nearby as Mitt and Minn climbed into the back of the feed truck and settled in unnoticed. Moments later, the driver closed the tailgate and drove away. Still half asleep and weary, Victor asked with a start, "Quimby, did I tell them feed or seed?" Quimby poked at Victor, knowing that this question meant that Victor had sent them away on the wrong truck. Hours later, the feed truck pulled into a stop. It was late morning, and so Mitt and Minn thought that they must be close to Chicago. The pair hopped out and raced down the street, their paws moving as fast as their hearts were wishing them to run. But as the pair turned the first corner and raced headlong into a park, it was clear this was not Chicago. "Mitt!" cried Minn. "Where are we? This is not a city of skyscrapers and towers and cars and people. Where could we be?" Mitt did not want Minn to know that he was afraid they were lost. But as he lowered his ears, it must have told her so. Before they had a chance to say more, a crush of people flooded into the park where Mitt and Minn were standing. The people quickly began to sit at the picnic tables, each person opening brown paper sacks or white canvas bags. They were laughing and smiling, pulling out wedges of cheddar cheese and thick-seeded crackers. They had all sorts of treats, such as laces of red licorice and bags of potato chips. Okay, fourth graders, who do you think this is a group of? I'm thinking in my mind that this might be a group of like school-aged children going on like a field trip. So that's what comes to my mind. All at once, Mitt and Minn realized how hungry they were and waited under one of the tables for crumbs to drop. One of the tourists had set her canvas bag on the lawn beneath the table, and both mice crawled into it, enticed by the smell of grapes and chocolate cookies packed inside. The pair forgot all about their troubles as they moved about the bag, eating and resting, nibbling and dozing. With so much comfort and food, the pair quickly fell asleep. When it was time for the tourists to leave, the woman picked up her bag and slung it around her arm. Now Mitt and Minn were trapped inside with no way out. Here they are in the bag, all trapped. So they're trapped in the canvas bag. Okay, chapter 9, the land of Lincoln. The woman joined a line of visitors and walked into a building. They were chatting with each other about old Abe and how lovely it was to visit Springfield, Illinois this time of year. Mitt tried to listen and, in the simple way that a white-footed mouse can understand things, tried to figure out what they were saying. Before Mitt and Minn could learn any more about where they were, The woman dropped her bag, spilling the contents everywhere. She reached to grab the rolling grapes and chocolate cookies before they made a mess in the home of Abraham Lincoln, and the distraction allowed Mitt and Minn a chance to escape. The pair scurried up a wall of bookshelves to rest at the very top, out of the sight of the visitors. The sound of footsteps coming in and out of the room all day provided a low, steady rhythm that lulled Mitt and Minn into a long sleep. Long after the last visitor left the Lincoln home, Mitt and Minn were still sleeping on the shelf, unaware about how much time had passed. The clock chimed 12 times and midnight arrived. Minn woke first, feeling as if someone was staring at her in her sleep. And this picture is in your packet. Okay, that picture's in your packet. And someone was. So someone was staring at her in her sleep. "Hello there," the tall, thin gentleman greeted Minn in a formal way, nodding his head slightly and keeping one hand in his vest pocket. "I hope you have found my home warm and suitable for your resting pleasure," he added. With that, he held both mice in his hands and walked to the kitchen table, where he lit the lamp and poured himself a cup of tea. He placed the pair in the center of the table and let them talk to him, much in the way a pair of mice waking in the middle of the night can talk to a stranger. The conversation warmed Minn, as it reminded her of her life with Gertie in Minnesota. Mitt was awake too, now that the aroma of the tea aroused him. Before long, the pair was telling their story to the kind gentleman. Mitt went first, explaining how he had been searching for his home for a very long time, and that he and his sister were trying very hard to find their parents. Minn told all about her journey too, and how she ached to see her mother again, not just her mother mouse, but Gertie, the woman from Eli who had been her mother too. The man smiled, and in a smooth tone of voice told them that he understood about how much a mother's love can be. "All that I am," he said, "and I hope to be, I owe to my mother." Right then, Mitt and Minn knew that he understood their tale, and they thought perhaps he could help them find their way to Chicago, so they asked him for help. The gentleman looked out the window before responding to their request. He said, "That is my horse, old Bob. He is a good horse. He will take you to Chicago." Mitt and Minn joined him, looking out the window. It seemed like a fine idea, but Mitt worried that they would not get there soon enough to find their parents before winter set in. Minn disagreed. "The horse will be plenty fast, and what other choice do we have, Mitt?" Minn was upset with Mitt right now, and she let her feelings show. Mitt had little patience for his sister at the moment, so he came in at full charge. "What do you mean? All you do is tag along and follow anyway. I'm the one in the front trying to find the way." Minn huffed and turned her back toward Mitt. But then the nice man spoke. "Ah, now, you may take my horse, but you must remember this. A mouse divided against itself will not stand." Let me explain that, fourth graders. Okay, so this is supposed to be Abraham Lincoln, right, that they are talking to. And Abraham Lincoln, one of his famous quotes is, during the Civil War, is that a house, meaning like the United States, like house of government, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. So the author brought in the line, "A mouse divided against itself cannot stand. So that's what that line means. Okay, back to the book. Nobody had ever spoken to them in such a firm way or offered them such a fine piece of advice. So that they're saying, oh, yes, we can't be divided. We need to stand together. So they were listening to Abraham Lincoln's advice. Okay, back to the book. They quickly made amends. Amends means that they made up, that they said they were sorry to each other, right? And then they started off again. They quickly made amends and spent the rest of the night talking with the man at the kitchen table. The moment the sun rose, he told them old Bob was ready and waiting for them. As they scrambled out the door, he said, "You can call me Abe." With that, Mitt said goodbye, and Minn spoke to the man. "What a pleasant home you have, Abe." "Thank you." The pair ran out of the house and across the front lawn toward the horse. As they did, Mitt stopped to read a sign, slowly and letter by letter in the way a small mouse will read. It said, "Home of Abraham Lincoln, born 1809, died 1865, 16th President of the United States." The pair stood still. How could that be? Was he real? They stood there in disbelief, and then they remembered old Bob. It seemed that now, after all they had been through, they had a good way to reach Chicago. That is, if old Bob was real. That's where we will end today. Bye-bye, fourth graders.